is the future for green activism in Mpumalanga? Can it follow the PPP model of this project, public-private partnership? Or will it evolve the more confrontational model that has been more familiar in the past of the environmental movement? First, let me explain what I mean. To do so, I have to take you back to a time when there was not even a Kyoto Protocol, to say nothing of the COP21 agreement reached in Paris about a month ago. Ralph Nader started out in the 1960s as a consumer advocate exposing lack of safety in automobiles. He wrote a famous book called Unsafe at Any Speed that made him a household word in the USA. He went on to lead a group of activists called Nader's Raiders. And they later incorporated green issues because of the dangers posed to public safety by environmental degradation. Nader once joked about the smallest of the Great Lakes. Lake Erie is now so contaminated, you're advised to have a typhoid inoculation before you set sail on some parts of the lake. Water contamination levels derive not only from industrial effluent dumped in the lake, but also from acid rain falling from the sky. Air pollution caused dirty clouds to drop acid rain. Fish species that had survived since the age of the dinosaurs came to the edge of extinction. Nader told how some rivers were contaminated so badly that they could be lit on fire. In his words, the Buffalo River is so full of petroleum residuals, it's been classified an official fire hazard by the city of Buffalo. We have the phenomenon known as flammable water. There's some rivers right outside of Boston, New Hampshire, and Maine where if a person fell into them, I think they would dissolve before they drowned. The Al Jazeera article that's in your reader, in your delegate pack, I think gives many examples like what I've just mentioned from Ralph Nader's background about Mpumalanga and the situation we have with water contamination and with air pollution and so on. Now, in the 1970s, green activism came into its own with the emergence of Greenpeace. That's an NGO in Canada. It now operates in 40 countries with an international base in Holland. One of its offices is in Cape Town. Its roots are in anti-nuclear activism, but it also focuses on issues like climate change, deforestation, overfishing, commercial whaling, and genetic engineering. Some of these would be relevant in Mpumalanga. Until a month ago, the international director of Greenpeace was a South African named Kumi Naidoo, who was a struggle activist in his earlier years. Greenpeace says that it accepts no money from governments. But it's funny because I think there are few governments left, if any, that would want to fund its very proactive methods. It is rather supported, though, by a membership of 2.9 million people and some foundation grants. By the 1980s, this model of cajoling and critiquing government evolved into political parties, usually called the Green Party. Especially in Europe, these became very influential and have made a lot of difference in terms of cleaning up the rivers and cleaning up the air in Europe, I might add. Believe it or not, there are now green parties in 90 countries in the world. But in spite of several attempts in the Western Cape to contest elections in this way, political debate in South Africa has remained focused on black and white more than on green and red. Remember that when the Nats folded up, its leader, Martinus van Schalkwyk, was appointed Minister of Environmental Affairs. No such cabinet post even existed in any country back in the 1960s or the 1970s. His appointment was in 2004, 1 year before the Kyoto Protocol entered into force in 2005. I pray that blacks and whites can join together to work for green. C4L launched its Green Livelihoods program in 2010 in this very new context of collaboration. Rather than antagonistic lobbying or confrontational approach, a PPP model was piloted, and that was intentional, but only in this province, only in Mpumalanga. This blended entrepreneurship training for poor and unemployed youth, a social evil in its own right, with some technical training in the new green occupations. For example, solar water heaters to replace electric geysers, rainwater harvesting, leak repair, recycling, waste, and carbon sequester to clean the air. Remember that vocations like recyclers or solar fitters have only appeared in the OFO, that is the Organizing Framework for Occupations, in recent years, not like a pilot or a nurse, which have been there for decades. In principle, government is on board with a pledge in last year's SONA that 30% of government contracts at municipal level will go to TREs, Township and Rural Enterprises. But another reality, research by Civicus, is that governments worldwide are deeply suspicious of non-governmental organizations that challenge their policies, even in democracies. There is less and less appreciation for the likes of Nader's Raiders or Greenpeace. So less critique and more collaboration is the order of the day. That is the spirit of this Green Livelihoods program and of this conference. We can only hope that both district and local municipalities will share the sentiment and open doors to youth who have been trained, to some business opportunities in mitigation and adaptation to climate change.
Through this cohesiveness conference, we are challenged and we are able to bring all stakeholders together under one roof, being on the same page, to expose yourselves and ourselves to these opportunities, to the pertinent green issues that are directly affecting our core business in the skills development and training landscape in the province, in terms of your provincial growth and development strategy, but also to provide EWCETA the opportunity to reflect on the importance of giving green skills development a much needed energy boost and injection.
Although a bit oversimplified, it can be said that the project rollout was divided into 4 phases. The first was 3 months focused on recruitment. In the second quarter, the entrepreneurship training began with the rollout of how to write the business plan, which I think all the learners who are here today have taken. In the third quarter, the technical training began in places where the enterprise training had already passed through. Instead of ending, though, after 12 months, at the end of the fourth quarter, we invoked a clause in the contract that allowed for a 3-month extension, because the attrition rate on one hand and the ingress of substitutes on the other exceeded the rate of 10% that we had planned for. So during the fourth quarter, while the assessment and moderation phase of the training got underway, we had to deal with the higher than expected rate of dropouts and the ingress of over another 400 learners. That is now 40% more learners than the benchmark of 1,000. The extension period of 3 months has just ended, and C4L's end of project report was submitted to the EWCETA on January 15th last month. By that time, the SORs, that is the statements of results, for 756 of the 1,000 learners had already been submitted to the CETA. The remaining SORs do, in fact, exceed the benchmark of 1,000. But youth by nature are somewhat transient, and the project's target group is poor and unemployed youth. So the PSC adopted a policy of inclusion. Do not turn anyone away, it said, as we can register them retroactively. I was reminded of the phrase, a school without walls. There was no reception where you needed to check in every morning, and the distances involved around the province made it hard for a trainer with a group of 30 youth signing an attendance register to cross-check whether they were all on the learner database.
There are many lessons learned from this project and from the conference. Above all, that the spirit of collaboration, of public-private partnership still needs to be worked on. Less confrontation is needed and more convergence. Municipal managers need to meet and engage with the youth who have been trained with funds from the National Skills Fund. Cooperatives still need incubation and mentorship. The only way to redress the damage done to date and to avoid environmental degradation reaching the buffalo proportion of flammable water is for us all to join forces and collaboration. To paraphrase the old proverb, all hands on deck when the water's on fire. Thank you.